How we doing, Noah?
Good.
Good, all right. All right, folks, so we've been discussing the nature of the self, that is the suke, the soul, right? We call that philosophy of mind. And anytime we say philosophy of something, the first question we should ask is what? What is X? Whatever that subject is. If it's a philosophy of science, we want to know what that thing is, called science. So like I'm doing philosophy of science, and biologists go, well, we're science. And the chemist says, well, we're scientists too. And then the geologists say, we're scientists. And you go, wow, you guys are pretty different. What makes you all science that you call yourself? You want to know the necessary and sufficient conditions for that. So when we talk about the philosophy of mind, the thing we'd like to ask first is, what is the mind? Now, last week what we did was we discussed the faculties of the mind. And what were some of the faculties? Those would be the intellect, the will, the emotions, right? And the appetites. And if we look at what makes humans humans, as opposed to mere animals, we can look that it is our intellect that generally governs our will. I say generally. And maybe I should go backwards and say it is the fact that we have an intellect that can govern the will. But what often makes humans more like animals is that we allow ourselves to be governed by our appetites and our emotions. Okay? Now, I don't know to what extent animals have emotions. Some have argued that they do. Okay? I'm not going to find my dog laughing at my jokes. They don't get it, but I think that takes the intellect. All right? But I can see that he can seem to be exhibits some sort of satisfaction in certain pleasures. How's that? Maybe we can call that joy. All right? Maybe he could feel upset or scared, especially when, or guilty when he gets on the table, and he does, and he's not a small dog, has gotten on the table to literally finish off the food, or not even finish it off, just get rid of it for us before we even get a chance to get there. Yes, he's that sneaky. And then we go to him and the other dog, and you could tell which one did it, right? Guilty dog. But what makes humans human seems to be part of, well, the imago Dei, certain attributes that God has given man, in that we share in his likeness, right? He's made us in the image and likeness of himself. And there are things about us. We're creative. We use reason. We have moral understanding, right? And so these are things that dogs and cats and stuff, they're not going out and creating art. They're not, they don't even appreciate beauty sometimes, right? They act on their appetites. And so when we live in accordance with our appetites, and that's not to say we shouldn't use our appetites. I would not eat if I didn't have an appetite, right? We wouldn't be here if mom and dad and their parents didn't have certain appetites for each other as to produce us. And so, I mean, they all are important, but they are not why we are here, okay? And those are not what we should be governed by, but there are people who are governed by them, and they make themselves out to be what are called bestial. What does it mean to be bestial? Aristotle talked about bestial or bestiality, and it does not mean just love of animals in that regard. Bestial means that you're governed by your appetites, and when you're governed by your appetites, you're obviously like the beasts. And when you're governed by your appetites, you are more like the animals than you are like people. Now, that is what, and of course he does so in the context of seeking out happiness. So if you want to be happy, I would avoid trying to fill your life with merely the satisfaction of your appetites. I would try to become the master of your appetites. Master your appetites. Master your emotions. Don't let your emotions master you. There is a time to feel sad. It is the result of something, but it should not always be the cause of something. If you are angry about something, it should cause you to think, not necessarily to act. All too many people have punched and struck as the result of feeling, but they didn't stop and think. Ought I punch? Ought I strike? Okay? All too many people react as animals might, rather than as humans should. Okay? So now, when we get back to talking about, that's what the mind does. It thinks, it wills, it emotes, and it has appetites. It is drawn towards stuff, okay? That's what an appetite does. It draws you towards things. All right, so it's very important. Now, so what was the first question we asked again? And I'm saying that because I just told you what the answer is. If it's in philosophy of mind, what should the first question be? Not what the mind does, even though I told you that. We should ask what, I gave you 5 of these. 5 is. What is the mind, remember? We want to know what is the mind. Like if science, so we're in the philosophy of science, we want to know what is science. If we're in biology or the philosophy of biology, I want to know what is life, right? Did anybody ever tell you what life is? Are any of you, we have nursing students in here, right? Where am I nursing? You're a nurse student, right? Have you taken biology? Not yet. Never, not even in high school.
Oh yeah, but yeah,
Freshman year in high school? Yeah. Was it freshman? I think that was sophomore. A little behind. Chemistry was sophomore? Oh, pretty good. So did they tell you what life is? They did not. They told you what living things do, right? They presupposed life, but they didn't tell you what it is. Philosophy should ask you, what is life? What is it that cells have that rocks do not? Does that make sense to you? Now we can tell you what they do. Living things metabolize, do they not? And we can look at them under the microscope and we can see the different parts of the cell, correct? And we go, that's what it's doing, but I want to know what it is, what life is, that it has it, okay? Well, anyway, with the mind, I want to know what it is. I can tell you what it does. We just told you the faculties of the mind. So what is it? What is the mind? And I gave you some options, but I'm going to give you a bunch today. I'm going to give you a bunch today if I have chalk. And I'm pretty sure I do. So, remember, I started off in metaphysics by discussing a couple options, right? The world is either all physical, all non-physical, or both, right? And I want you to think, for those who are out there who believe that the world is all physical things, if you're going to talk about the mind, yourself, who you are, right? If you believe everything is physical, then you must believe you are nothing more than a physical thing. And I want you to remember that physical things do not have free will. If I drop the chalk cannot do otherwise other than follow the laws of physics. You understand? I talked about reduction the other day, that if A is identical to B, and if B is identical to C, then A is identical to C. That if the mind is identical to the brain, and the brain is identical to the cells that make it up, right? Then the mind is nothing more than cells, and cells are nothing more than atoms, right? Made up of atoms. And do atoms have free will? No. And if atoms do not have free will, then the cells don't have free will. And if the cells don't have free will, the brain doesn't have free will. And the brain doesn't have free will, then the mind doesn't have free will. These are just physical parts and wholes. No matter how many parts you put to it, it doesn't mean it will have free will. It only does what the laws of physics tell it. And that's metaphorically tell it to do, because physics don't tell anybody anything, because the physical is not mental. You understand that? Okay. So let's take a look at the mind here. That's a phi, that's just short for philosophy. of mind. Nous is the Greek word for mind, psyche for the soul. So if you're in psychology and they say it's to study the mind, they are wrong. The word, at least, is soul. But if they want to interpret it or translate it as mind, they do so because they probably just don't like the word soul, because it is religious sounding. And heaven forbid, us bring in religion to the academic world, okay? As though it's not a legitimate field of study. But in the mind, philosophy of mind, we have some options, okay? And we want, from a naturalistic worldview, you're going to have a material, right? Actually, don't put down material yet. Let's put down mono as though there's one substance. And we'll call that monism. And we'll call this dualism here. Okay? Now in monism, you have two options. That's an I. That's a dot on the I. That round thing, it looks like an O because it was supposed to be. Monism, you have two options. It's either all physical or all non-physical. Okay? So with the monism, if it's all physical, right, we'll call it material monism. Material monism as a form of philosophy of mind. That the mind is, whatever it is one substance, and that substance is physical. Okay? Monism has to do with one. Or you have idealism, just like the option, the other option in metaphysics, which that turns out the mind, everything is non-physical. Okay? Pretty easy so far. You got the mind, it's one substance, and that substance is either all physical or non-physical. Not a problem, correct? Okay. In materialism, you have a couple options. You have what's called reductive material monism and non-reductive. Like I said, reduction says A is identical to B and B is identical to C. If that's the case, then A is identical to C. Okay, could go if A is identical to B and B is identical to C and C is identical to D, then A is identical to D, goes all the way down to Z, however many you want to go. All right? That is one substance, it's material, and that's what we'll call the mind. All right, not a problem with that. Many people hold that, and there are different views of reductive material monism. If one is an atheist, that's generally going to be kind of their path, especially from a scientismist approach. What do I mean by scientismist rather than a scientist or science? When I say scientism, it's a negative, it's a pejorative term. It's people who believe that science will answer all of our questions, and they treat science as though it's some kind of religion. Okay? Praise science. And you'll hear this right now. Just listen to the science, man. You're a science denier. You've heard that, right? Well, I'm a science denier because I deny not all science. I love science. I love biology. I love geology. I love chemistry. Well, what do I deny? I deny particular theories. But some people go, if you deny this theory, you must be a science denier. And these are people who are scientismists, believe that their scientific theory answers all the particular problems of the world, etc., yet they cannot cure the common cold. Okay? I don't know who the science guy is anyway. You know, science says a lot. Science doesn't say anything. Scientists say it. Remember that. Okay, so if somebody says science says this, you say which scientist says it. Because if one scientist says one thing, you can guarantee there are a bunch out there saying otherwise. Okay? Science is not univocal. They do not all agree. In fact, what makes science great is all the disagreement, and that helps us get closer to the truth. All right? All right. So, you all remember the 5 is's, right? Good. Because the is we are talking about here right now is kind of the is of identity. All right? What am I identical to? What is the mind identical to? A is B. We want to know what that is. So the mind, this is what they're trying to give examples of. So in reductive material monism as a philosophy of mind, you got some options here. One, you'll have what's called behaviorism. There are 2 types of behaviorism. One is methodological, which I like, very helpful. And the other one's philosophical behaviorism. Okay? Can you see all that with the camera?
Like, it's like the whole thing, or?
Yeah. How's that?
Like you're covering the right half.
I'm not getting to the right half today. As long as we get over here, we're good.
Oh yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
good. That's where we're going to be today.
Hold on. It's like still. Can you move a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Your ugly face is getting in the way.
Yeah.
He has me moving completely off the screen. All right, so what we're looking at is behaviorism as a reductive material monistic view of the mind. And there are 2 types. One is methodological, which is not really a theory that reduces the mental to the physical, but what it does is it's just a great approach to psychology. It's a way that I can see certain behaviors. If I see you're crying, that is sad behavior, meaning behavior that is associated with an emotion, a mental state of sadness. And if I see you crying, what should I do? Well, I'm not going to laugh at you. What I'm going to do is come up and say, hey, are you okay? Because it is indicative that something is mentally not right, that you are sad about something and you're having something going on that is causing you some sort of distress, okay? And we could take surveys, which psychologists do, and as they interview you and they've seen thousands of cases of people coming in crying, they go, people cry when they are sad. Now you could say, well, sometimes people don't cry when they're sad, right? Sometimes people cry when they're tears of joy. You go, I come up and I see you crying, I go, what's wrong? And you go, nothing, I just won $10 million. It'll answer all my financial problems, okay? And I'm like, hey, praise the Lord. Okay. That's counterexample to that, sure. Okay, fine. Okay, great. And we can do that with all sorts of behaviors. We could say, there's all sorts of behaviors can be associated with certain other issues. Certain issues, you go to the prison systems, you start doing criminal behavior studies, and what you find out is their behavior often is associated with certain things that have gone in their life, with abuse, with their mental states will, they'll act out as a result of certain things. And why do these certain things occur? Because certain other things occur. And they can tie it all together, in the method. It helps them psychologically to evaluate people, to help people, to help the criminal become less, inclined to commit crimes, perhaps. It helps marriages. It's great. It's excellent. If your child is acting out in school, you could say something's going on at the house. Right? We could tell by behavior something's going on mentally, and we want to know what's going on internally because of their outward behavior. And that's all. I say that to say behaviorism can be interesting and good, a useful tool methodologically. So that's not the problem. The problem occurs when you say the mind, because that's the question we're asking. What is the mind? And we say it is a behavior, like a mental state. Let's take the mental state of pain. And you go, well, what is pain? Well, the philosophical behaviorist is going to say that pain is a mental state, and mental states are behavioral states. Behavioral states of a certain type, let's take pain. And pain will be like jumping up and down and shouting out and cussing. Okay? Screaming mother, father. Right? Going, oh my gosh, this hurts so badly. And you can tell if I'm jumping around, kicking things and going, golly, man. Oh. You'd be going, dude, are you okay? Right? Because I have the pain behavior. Do I have the mental state of pain? So this is where the problem comes, and this is where, remember I taught you guys a type of distinction, like a real distinction. If you have A without B and B without A, they're not the same thing. If I could have pain behavior and not have the mental state of pain, let's pretend I'm faking it like I just was, then I don't have the mental state of pain. If I have, they're not the same thing. If I get A without B and B without A, not the same thing. If I have pain behavior without the mental state of pain, they are not the same thing. See, the philosophical behaviorist, though, is going to suggest that behaviorism is the mind. It's the substance of, it's a physical thing called the body, or, which is behaving in a certain way, right? It's material. And it reduces merely to the behavior, that all mental states are behavioral states. Problem with it is you could have behavioral states without the mental states, and the mental states without the behavioral states, A without B and B without A, which shows that they are not the same thing. They are really distinct. It's a real distinction. See, I didn't just teach you your real distinction versus modal distinction for fun. It's to use in this case, to determine whether or not it is true that mental states are nothing more than behavioral states. Does that make crystal clear sense to you? It is. It's pretty easy, but it's pretty weird that some philosophers would equate the mind with nothing more than behaviors. But you can show that it's false just by use of that. Okay? So that's one view, and look, we watch movies all the time of people. I remember working in Hollywood, and new girls coming off the bus would be like, I could cry on cue. Nobody cares. It's a shtick. You put a little chapstick under your eyes, everybody can cry on cue, okay? So we don't care about that in Hollywood. Okay? You can pretend that you're sad, yippee. And if you're good, you can convince me that you're sad, right? But are you sad? So you could have the mental state of something else. You could have the behavioral state of sadness, right? And you could have the mental state of something else. Shows that it's not identical to the behavior state. I don't need to keep beating this dead horse. That's pretty obvious. Another popular one is type identity. Type identity theory. Okay? It says that mental states are identical to types of brain states or physical states. I'll put it up here. MS is for mental state, right? And that certain mental states are identical to certain brain states. So let's go back with pain. That pain, have you taken A&P? Have my nurses taken A&P yet?
I'm taking it right now.
So do you know what C fibers are? Have you gotten to the brain and the nervous system yet?
Oh, we're in that right now.
You're in that right now, so you might learn that there are certain fibers in the nervous system called C fibers. And there's certain locations in the brain that these C fibers, I guess, trigger. And when you are in pain, you have a C fiber firing event, okay? And so some would argue that the mental state of pain is identical to a C fiber firing event, okay? That is pain. It is physical. It is a mental state and it is physical, all right? Is it true? So, like, if your professor says this is pain? They may not be philosophically sophisticated, and they may not mean to just inherit the language of type identity, right? Where they just believe mental states are physical states, right? And okay? But let's use our tools to ask the question. Is it true that pain is identical to a physical state called a C fiber firing event? If that is the case, if the mental state, called mental state of pain, right? Pain, and we'll call the physical event, the brain state, call that a C fiber, right? Firing event, right? If we're going to say that pain is identical to the C fiber firing event, that would mean that whatever is true of pain is also true of the C fiber. You understand that? Because they're identical. The is of identity. If A is identical to B and B is identical to A, then A has all the same properties that B has, and B has all the same properties that A has. Why do they have the same properties? Because they are the same thing. Right? If this podium, right, is identical to the thing that my hand is on, then this podium has all the same properties of the thing that my hand is on, because they're the same thing. Brownness, hardness, shapeness, location. You get what I'm saying? Excellent. Okay. So if the C fiber firing event is identical to the mental event of pain, then it must have all the same properties. Properties of C fiber firing event have geographical location. They have extension. They have color. I can look at a C fiber and see the color of it if it cut you open, okay? Which will also cause some pain, okay? I can touch your C fiber. I could potentially smell it. My dog probably could. Better nose than I have. None of these things, though they are true of C fiber firing events, they can be seen, they can be observed, they can be touched, right? They can be observed by a third person, from a third person perspective. None of these things are true of pain, of the mental state. The mental state of pain is first person only. I cannot feel your pain. I can feel your C fiber. I cannot see your pain. I can see a C fiber. You cannot see your pain, but you can see a C fiber. Pain does not have weight, but C fibers have weight. Pain does not have texture, color, or taste, but C fibers do. You see that there are several different properties that the two things have they don't even have them in common. They are properties that are different and completely different. One is from a first person perspective alone, the other is from third person perspective. You can see from a third person perspective one C fiber, but one cannot see the other's pain. And thus we know that they are not identical. There are other problems with this. Now, I'm going to introduce a new word to you. It's called qualia. 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 Qualia is the phenomena that we experience, like the sounds, the visual stuff, colors, textures, the properties, how our mind experiences things, right? Like if you just closed your eyes right now and not fell asleep, because some of us may be tired, and you just took inventory of the sensations that were going on around you, you might feel things in your hand, like the pen. You go, oh, that's the density of the pen or the pencil. You could feel the coolness of the desk on your wrist or something, and all that, those are the mental associated things you are experiencing mentally. Feel your feet now. You probably weren't even paying attention to it, but now you are, right? Can you feel what's going on with your feet? Okay? Where is that located? Is it in your mind or is it in your feet? Your feet are on the ground, but where's the sensation? Okay? And we want to know, that we'll call that qualia. Well, let's talk about some mental qualia like colors, okay? I want to introduce that to you because I'm going to introduce something else. Well, let's wait. Let's get backwards. Just keep that in mind. We're going to introduce that to you when I get to functionalism. But I'm not going to get to functionalism because I want to introduce to you Martian pain first, the problem of Martian pain. Now, a lot of people believe that there's life out there on other planets. Is there anybody here that believes that there's life on other planets? You believe that, okay? Do you believe like microscopic life, or do you mean intelligent life?
Both.
Both. Why do you believe that?
Well, because I just believe that we're not the only ones.
Well, that's what you believe. Why?
Because if there are other planets,
There are certainly other planets, okay?
then there could be one.
There could be, but you're saying there are.
I mean, I don't know if there is, but I believe that.
You believe it, but why do you believe it? Let's go back to epistemology here. What's your evidence? Now, people go, the universe is so big, there's so many millions of planets out there. And if there's so many millions of stars out there, and there's so many millions more planets out there, and some stars are like us, and then there's a main sequence star, and and a planet's within the same, distance from the sun, and of all these millions, and then it too could have developed life, right? Yeah, that's all great. So some people have done math and they've determined that I'm going to use a number dating back to the 90s, which it may have changed since then due to different studies or whatnot. But according to William Lane Craig, who was citing a source, a mathematician, suggested that the probability or possibility of life evolving spontaneously from chance, like accidentally, not with God, but accidentally, for that to happen would be 1 in 10 to the 69th power. That would be a 1 in 10 with 69 zeros behind it. That's pretty improbable, would you agree? Now, of course, according to mathematicians and cosmologists, the Earth, not the Earth, but the universe is only 18 billion years old. Okay, so billion is only 9 zeros, right? So we're talking 69. Okay, that's pretty improbable that Earth had life. Earth does have life, doesn't it? But now you go, well, what about life happening on another planet accidentally? That would have to happen somewhere else. Again, now what would the probability of that be? Be far less likely that it would happen twice accidentally. Okay? Not saying it couldn't happen. I'm just, Jim Carrey and Dumb and Dumber, so you're saying I got a chance, right? But let me tell you something. Yeah, a lot of people believe it because it sounds interesting, and hear about UFOs and all that good stuff, right? We're not alone, right? It makes for good science fiction. I'd just like to know the evidence. If you believe it, I want to know why. Is it just because somebody says, well, the standard argument is there's so many stars out there, right? But let's pretend there is for the problem of Martian pain. Let's not only pretend that there's other life out there in the universe somewhere, but that it's the next door planet. Okay, and it's from Mars, and we get out to Mars. Elon Musk is planning on going to Mars, and so Elon gets us out there, and they discover that there are other beings out there. We'll call them Martians. Okay, and these Martians are completely different than humans. They don't have C fibers like we have. They have other brain types. Okay, and they operate. And they're just like, sup, how you doing? And being good Americans, we want to make friends with them, right? And so we go to shake their hands, but what we don't know is that these are very gentle creatures, and you know, they're woke and all, and they're like, oh, we don't like being touched because it hurts us too much, right? And we shake their hands, and they don't know how strong we are because we're humans, right? Yeah, we always assume they're stronger than we are, right? But in this case, we're the strong ones, okay? And we shake their hands and like, oh my gosh, that hurts so badly, right? But they don't have C fibers, right? Remember, they're made of something else. If they have no C fibers and mental events such as pain are identical to C fibers, then they could not have the mental state of pain. Because it would be identical to C fibers. And if you do not have C fibers, then you do not have pain. Do you catch that? See, the animals on Earth have C fibers in our nervous system, and thus they are associated with pain. Every time there's a pain experience, a mental state of pain, there's a C fiber firing event, okay, in the animal kingdom. If you don't have it, you don't have pain, allegedly. But could one, theoretically, in a possible world, this is why we also do possible world experiments. So I have to introduce something to you now because I have to give you the tools to do it as we need them. So we have different worlds. We have what's called